Hi, it's Jamie from Guildbrook Farm and welcome to The Dirt. Today I want to talk about what is a true homesteader. Think of The Dirt as a getting to know you session, and today I want to talk about something that has been pretty controversial with a lot of other channels and a lot of blogs, which is what is the definition of a true homesteader? Now I looked this up, and it seems like the official definition can range anywhere from a definition from, say, the 1800s to one that incorporates modern technology. Ask any 20 people, to define what a true homesteader is, and you're going to get 20 different answers. So why all the controversy? Why is there this need to define this lifestyle and to categorize people? And who's right? Is it someone that's living like a homesteader from the 1800s? Or is it okay to use modern technology? Some say it's okay to have outside reliance, and others say that the only true homesteader is one who is completely self-reliant. So let's start with the hot topic, which is off-grid. To some, you can only be considered a true homesteader if you live off-grid, and that anyone who relies on modern technology, such as solar panels or battery reserves or wind turbines, isn't truly a homesteader. I find this a really interesting concept because kerosene lanterns were invented around the 1850s, and at that time, they were considered modern technology, and they were very quickly adopted by a lot of modern homesteaders. And kerosene lanterns, that's not something that can be produced on the homestead, so that relied on a constant supply of kerosene that had to be purchased. Even when electricity was invented and electrical grids were established sometime around the 1920s, many homesteaders who could afford it did take advantage of it. To others, you can only be a true homesteader if you have, say, 12 chickens, 2 goats, 10 hair sheep, 5 pigs, breeding rabbits, and maybe a cow or 2. Which the variety of animals serving different basic needs, and that's how they define how self-sufficient you are. But in looking back on our ancestors, most didn't have that many animals, or at least that many variety of animals. Depending on what region you lived in, goats were unheard of, cows were only for wealthy homesteaders, and in some areas only specialty farms carried any hair sheep or hair animals. And on some homesteads, there were no animals at all. Some just hunted for meat or traded for fiber. To some, you can't be considered a true homesteader unless you're generating all of your income from your homestead. This is one we hear a lot. Selling meat, eggs, vegetables, plants, crafts, fiber arts, or some spin-off of a skill. You aren't considered a true homesteader unless you're working for yourself. But our ancestors didn't. Sure, some sold pigs to pay taxes, or sold eggs to buy their kids' shoes, but the majority of them took jobs on other farms. They didn't trade for money. They traded for produce or products that they would then either keep themselves or then trade again for some products that they needed. Others would work in town as seamstresses or maids, or some would work in stores, and even others worked on the railroad for a few extra cents to pay for items that they needed. What about machinery? Some say you aren't a true homesteader if you own modern machinery. Tractors to plow the fields, sawmills to cut boards, front loaders to move dirt. Unless you're using a horse and hand tools, you aren't considered a homesteader. But our ancestors sure took advantage of modern technology when it was invented. Hay balers and wheat threshers would travel from farm to farm, and then homesteaders would rent the machines to shorten their workload by weeks. Some say you aren't a true homesteader unless you own your own land and a lot of it. But a lot of our own ancestors didn't own their own land. As a matter of fact, homesteaders who took advantage of the Homestead Act didn't own their land until 5 years of continuous residency was up. And it wasn't until after those 5 years that they had the option of purchasing land from the government. I'm not sure anybody would say they weren't considered true homesteaders during those first 5 years. What about homeschooling? Are you considered a homesteader if you aren't homeschooling your kids? Well, sure, some of our ancestors were homeschooled. More of them hiked the proverbial 2 to 3 miles to a public one-room schoolhouse, but most still didn't go to school at all. Then there are those that say you aren't a true homesteader unless you're producing all of your own food. And our ancestors sure did produce quite a bit of their own food, but they didn't produce all of it. They went to town to pay for things such as sugar and salt and flour, coffee, candy, and sometimes leavening agents. And on top of that, our ancestors had a much more limited diet than we do today. And some of them only survived on milk, bread, meat, and the handful of vegetables that they could grow during the growing season. Then there are those that define homesteading as being completely self-sufficient. You have to provide all of your own clothing, food, materials for shelter, and everything must be handcrafted with nothing purchased at a store. You rely on no one but yourself. Well, our ancestors were certainly self-reliant to the extent that they didn't purchase many items from a store, but to say that they were completely self-sufficient absolutely isn't true at all. Our ancestors were heavily reliant on their neighbors, their family members, their community for their very survival. Communities would actually work together to harvest each other's produce. They had corn shucking parties. They would get together in the fall to butcher each other's animals. They took turns raising each other's barns and houses. And here's a big one you don't see, is they took care of each other's sick and injured. They would come from miles and miles around if somebody was ill, and they would take care of that family just like they would take care of their own farm. And they would spend days or weeks or whatever was necessary to bring in the harvest and to take care of the animals. I don't know anybody that would do that today. Most families don't even do that for each other today, let alone a neighbor from miles around. On top of that, the elderly were taken care of a lot differently. If somebody got old and wasn't able to take care of animals and to cut firewood, neighbors would take care of each other. They would bring them food and they would cut their firewood for them. Today we put them in nursing homes. In that world, there was another thing that was set up that's different than today, which was the whole system of bartering and trade, and that doesn't exist today either. One family would own hair sheep and a loom and would make cloth. Another family would make wagon wheels. Another would specialize in blacksmithing. And then they would just trade for goods and services. No one family did everything themselves. It would be absolutely unreasonable to expect one person or one family to do everything themselves. So why would we expect homesteaders to do that today? The truth is that the homesteading lifestyle of the 1800s is long gone. It's a world that doesn't exist anymore, and to some extent, it's a good thing that it doesn't. Too often we romanticize history, but real history has an ugly side that most of us wouldn't want if somebody handed it to us. A period of extreme poverty, famine, sickness that most of us can't even comprehend. Hardships that ended lives early and caused extreme suffering. Very few, I think, if any of us, would want our children to wake up before dawn and to work the fields until dusk with few clothes on their back and little food in their bellies to make a sustenance life and to survive another year. But ever since the 1970s and the Back to the Land movement, there are individuals and families who are trying to revive homesteading. Why is this? What would drive somebody to this lifestyle? Well, for most, it's the idea of becoming more self-sufficient or self-reliant. For others, it's about escaping the rat race and living a simpler lifestyle. And for others still, it's a last resort. People who can't get jobs and who feel that the homesteading lifestyle is the only option that they have left for making a life for themselves, for surviving. But to try and create an 1800s lifestyle in today's world, it just isn't practical. The world has changed too much. Families no longer work on one giant homestead to all help bring in the year's harvest. Instead, families are spread out across the country and all working as individual units. The standards for education have completely changed since the 1800s. Now, to have a career, it requires a bachelor's or even a master's degree, which can run somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Livestock, which used to be allowed to roam free on acres and acres of land, now requires expensive fencing and continued maintenance. Medicine is another one. Medicine is no longer limited to a bottle of tonic and a doctor who makes house calls on a horse and is paid in chickens. Instead, it's substituted with expensive or overinflated medicines, copays, and insurance costs. The town and the local general store is no longer right over the hill, but now requires an automobile and gas and car maintenance just to get somewhere. The world's not the same, so I don't believe it's realistic to assume that someone can only be a true homesteader if they live the life of someone from the 1800s. So, what is a true homesteader today then? Well, in my opinion, the one thing that has been consistent throughout the centuries, throughout the changes in technology, throughout the changes in social structure, is that homesteaders are those seeking to have a better life for themselves through means that they can control. Homesteading, to me, is about freedom. It's about taking steps towards a self-reliant, self-sufficient lifestyle that is within your means. To some, that may mean having 50 acres, chickens, sheep, goats, cows, and a year-round greenhouse. To others, it may mean raising their own herbs and salad in a flower box of a rental unit of a high-rise. And to others, it may mean canning produce from a local farm. To some, it may mean having a thriving CSA business, and to others, it may mean a wife running a hobby farm while the husband works off-site to pay for the house and insurance and other needs. To some, it may mean hunting for wild game, and to others, it may mean a permaculture vegan homestead. All too often, we try to box each other or even ourselves in with terminology and a definition. And it's not just with homesteading. This is our way of associating with another group of people. But there's a danger in that. When we start narrowing our definition, we start excluding people. We even start excluding ourselves. By specifically defining what a homesteader is, we are creating a set of goals or checkboxes that most people will never be able to meet. For some, there's no possibility of having 50 acres and multiple livestock. Land's diminishing, and the cost is going up. The down payment for land like that is a pipe dream for most people. Not to mention the taxes and the cost for running such an operation. For others, a disability may keep them from working with animals or for doing any kind of heavy lifting. Some may need to live near the city to remain close to their families. Others may need to hold an outside job to keep medical bills at a minimum. Some may live in an area where the farm market is saturated and the price for goods will never pay for expenses. A lot of these people may never even try to become self-sufficient or self-reliant, thinking that they can't meet what someone's definition of a true homesteader is. But the saddest, by far, are those who risk everything to fit that definition. They give up their jobs, sell their homes, purchase land, and quickly realize that they're in over their heads. And then for one reason or another, usually financial, they can't make ends meet and they end up quitting, selling everything and moving back to town, feeling like failures for doing so. It's these cases that truly break my heart. I mean, what if somebody had told them that it was okay to take it slow, that skills take years to learn, and that they should start homesteading right where they are, whether it's in the city or in the suburbs, that they would need money no matter how self-sufficient they were, and that it's okay if they have to hold an outside job. that homesteading today costs money. Money for fencing, for garden supplies, for outbuildings, for feed, and that it's okay if you don't do all that stuff your first year or ever. That it's okay if you only ever just get chickens, or if you have no livestock at all. That it's better to start with a small garden than to jump to 50 acres and feel pressured to raise all of your own food. That it's okay if you don't cook all your meals on a wood stove and wash your laundry in a bucket. If the definition weren't so strict, whether self-imposed or not, would these people still be on the homesteading path? To me, a person becomes a homesteader when they make that mental shift from consumerist to producer, and they start to take the first steps towards a self-reliant lifestyle. When they realize that they don't have to rely on a grocery store or a Walmart or the government in order to survive. Now, I know that some people are going to say that it's not fair to put somebody like that, somebody who, say, just started composting, or somebody who has a pot of lettuce growing on their balcony, in the same category as somebody who's been raising all their own food for the last 20 years. Some may even say it's an insult to those who have done their time. But I ask why? Why? Everyone has to start somewhere. I doubt, say, Picasso would be offended with an art student calling himself a painter, or Einstein being offended at a young stargazer who calls himself an astronomer. Just the same, I actually think they'd be pretty proud that somebody was carrying on the tradition and learning the trade, no matter how far they were able to take it. The point is that the lifestyle is continuing, and I truly believe that we can learn, all of us can learn from anybody at any level. So, if you're thinking of going down this path, don't worry about what you can't do. Don't worry about checking all of the homesteading boxes of producing your own food, all your own fodder, having dairy animals, having meat animals, fiber arts, homeschooling, scratch cooking, living off grid, making your own body products, making your own household products, learning to sew, permaculture, canning, composting, and so on and so forth. Start with one skill. Start with one item and take your time. Add on slowly. See how much you can handle. And when you figure out one skill and you feel ready, then start another. Don't feel pressured to take on too much at once. And if something becomes too much, stop doing it. Take a step backwards. It's okay. Just remember that this is your life. It's no one else's. You have no one to listen to or to live up to but yourself. A definition shouldn't define who you are and what path you should take. So what are our goals? What path have we set for ourselves? Well, 2 years ago, when we decided to go down this path, we set up a list of goals. One of those goals was to have off-grid capability. Another one was to utilize permaculture for food production. Another was to have self-proliferating livestock. We also wanted to manage our own healthcare through naturopathy, homeopathy, and through potentially growing our own medical supplies. The possibility of having vehicles that can be self-maintained, and we wanted to have solar and water-fed outbuildings, and we wanted to set up our own business. Now, and then Jeremy added an extra one on where he wanted the ability to take a vacation. Our time frame for meeting these goals is a lifetime. We have no intention of going out and doing all these things at once. As a matter of fact, we are intentionally working on them very, very slowly. So slowly that if something happens to either one of us, or if at any time anything becomes overwhelming, we can get out of that situation very, very quickly and without a whole lot of loss. Now, if we don't accomplish all these goals, if life happens and our plans change, that's okay. I'm pretty generic in my goals. I said off-grid capability. I didn't say that I was going to live with, say, tallow lamps and rag wicks. Now I want to learn how to do that. I think that's totally cool, and I definitely want to know that skill. But to say that that's the only lifestyle I'm going to live, that that's my goal, is just unreasonable. I mean, I may be able to do that now at the age of 40, but when I'm 70 or 80 years old, I can't see myself butchering a cow and melting down the fat for tallow and making tallow lamps. I likewise can't see myself at the age of 70 or 80 chopping wood. I would love to be able to, but I am counting on not being able to do that. So rather than focusing my efforts on just having a wood stove, I'm focusing my efforts on creating something that's going to work for me further down the line, so when I'm older as well. So for example, I'm working on building systems that would allow me to have heat and light without the physical labor. That may mean getting a side job now so that I can buy some solar panels. That may mean setting up passive streams of income that can pay for electricity when I'm older, or to pay somebody for propane. That may mean setting up social networks so that I can trade something that I have for firewood delivery. I don't have the answer to that. The point is that this is shaping as I go along. I'm aware of possible limitations that I could encounter further on down the line, and I'm taking the steps to mitigate that. And it's okay if that doesn't fit somebody's 1800s definition of what a true homesteader is. It's okay if I never get cows. It's okay if goats don't work out for us. The truth is that this is my life, and this is the only one that I have. And I need to make this work for me. So if that doesn't fit someone's definition of a true homesteader, I'm okay with that. Because ultimately it's me that has to reap what I sow. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on this. Leave them in the comment section below. If you guys like this kind of stuff, like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.